Anarchy is usually classified as a state of disorder due to the absence or the non-recognition of authority, at least by dictionary definitions. Anarchy I find to be such a very slim and superficial and flat word. I mean, it truly does not encompass what needs to be understood in the artistic world. To really start this off, I have to basically give one thought to you at the introduction of this is that filmmaking is organic. I believe that every film is that it's made from a singular. I believe that every film that is made from a singular filmmaker should be of a different style, a different mood, and a different attitude to that of the one coming before and after it. A film that, in its creation, stresses your boundaries and pushes you into places that you are uncomfortable in and challenge you as an artist. There are many directors out there that have very particular style that is cemented in a certain concrete format, and that's perfectly alright for them. But at the same thing can be said about writers, traditional artists, actors, etc. They have discovered a formula that works for them and helps them succeed. However, though it may prove successful, it doesn't mean that it will work for the entirety of your subsequent career. Filmmaking, especially, is an art form that consistently, constantly changing and evolving. It is constantly changing. This may be through technique and technology, and we've seen the lengths of it as grown in the brief history that has existed on the earth. Though we seem to forget that as the art form changes, the artist needs to evolve with it. Due to technology and skill developing, the ideas and people involved in filmmaking should also evolve, and truly this applies to art in general terms. Art is moved through leaps and bounds, through many hoops and hurdles in all of recorded history that it would be foolish to think otherwise. However, we're still operating on the archaic means of artistic expression. In order to truly fulfill as an artist, to be fulfilled as a human being pursuing art, you need to always keep changing yourself, bettering in many ways that make you and others uncomfortable to a degree. Art is application of human creativity and imagination, and with this expression, all art must stress the limits, pushing to a point that you do not wish to cross it and then pass that point. As our minds evolve, as our rationale changes, so should the art we produce. Not because films are becoming more graphic or hostile or whatever the genre might accompany the film, avant-garde, horror, romance, whatever. The filmmaking needs to mature. It has been maturing, and quite rapidly at certain points in our time. But at the same time, it matures in different ways and at different speeds. Now, one of the more popular and progressive philosophies involving film theory is Nick Zed's Cinema of Transgression, in which he likens filmmaking produced by institutions of the studio and the film school to that of people who are not truly ascending the means of filmmaking or taking what he quotes as saying an easy approach to cinematic creativity, and that, quoting from the Cinema of Transgression Manifesto, that these people legitimize that this form of overall filmmaking schools and studios, they legitimize every mindless manifestation of sloppy movie making undertaken by a generation of misled film students, the dreary media art centers, and geriatric cinema critics. Now, in addition to the theories of the no-wave movement of the late 80s and early 90s in America, we also have Lars von Trier's Dogma 95, which gained popularity amongst unknown European filmmakers and then subsequently American filmmakers by suggesting that one can make a recognized film of a specific quality and style to gain recognition. without being dependent on commissions or sizable budgets from studios. It's another one of the more profoundly potent movements that helped craft filmmaking, first independent, then mainstream in the late 90s and into the 2000s. Its purpose was to, in their own way, purify filmmaking by refusing expensive and spectacular special effects, post production modifications of any kind, and technical gimmicks, whatever it might happen to be. But at the same time, these philosophies, I believe, are in contradiction to themselves. All of these movements try, and in many ways succeed. I will not deny that they have succeeded in various ways to break away from the norm and create something new. However, at the same time, they have rules. They have structure. They have guidelines in place in order for you to belong to this movement. Dogma 95, for example, has even a very, very strict limit set of rules they call the vow of chastity. And I'm going to read off the vow of chastity real quick. Number one, filming must be done on location. That has influenced many people from the new wave movement in Hollywood onward. Number two, props and sets must not be brought in. If a particular prop is necessary for the story, a location must be chosen where the prop is to be found. Number three, the sound must never be produced apart from the images or vice versa. Music must not be used unless it occurs within the scene being filmed. For example, a diegetic sound. The camera must be handheld. Any movement or immobility or attainable in the hand, like if you're able to keep the camera as still as you can just using your hand, it's permitted. The film must not take place where the camera is standing. Filming must take place where the action takes place. The film must be in color. Special lighting is not acceptable. If there is too little light for exposure, the scene must be cut or a single lamp be attached to the camera. Optical works and filters are forbidden. The film must not contain superficial actions such as murders, weapons, etc. This must not occur. Temporal and geographic alienation is forbidden. That is to say that the film takes place here and now. There's no discrimination to that fact. Genre movies are not acceptable. The film format must be in 35 millimeter Academy standard, and the director must not be credited. And that concludes that. But at the same time, I believe that these theories, the cinema of transgression, and also that Dogma 95 and very similar theories and philosophies, they completely defeat its own purpose if it sets up such strict rules. Filmmaking, getting back to such a limp, fundamental word as anarchy, must, as much as I find objection to the word, it's the closest thing to explain what filmmakers should be and in art in general. Anarchy is not simply a state of chaos where there's completely no organization and everything is convoluted without a set form to a point in which the film is nonsensical and meaningless. No, that's not true. That is not the meaning of anarchy. Anarchy is self-governing independence. And I believe, and I believe, and I hope that others believe, that filmmaking should be a self-governing and self-perpetuating existence. And because that this idea is so hard to execute and so hard to live by, it is usually dismissed as unattainable. It's quite true that, for me, for example, I do not always live by this idea myself, though I believe that every filmmaker should embrace it as a mantra nevertheless. I am very traditionally inclined towards most of my filmmaking technique. However, it does not mean that I still do not try new things each and every time I set out to make a film or a series, to reinvent myself with every new piece of art. I have a certain style that is reflected through the majority of my work, and In many ways, I seek to strive for that type of style sometimes, but at the same time, I always try to seek to transcend and break the mold I've continually settled myself in. As I've stated, filmmaking is an organic process. It should not resolve itself to completely remain in the same set structure that has existed since, it became an industry. It needs to adapt, just as the human race adapts, just as humanity changes. Filmmaking needs to accompany our evolution in whatever direction it will, whether by natural inclination or by force. However, this is not to say that filmmaking or film should accompany societal evolution necessarily. It does not. I am of the strict belief that filmmaking does not need to benefit nor detract from the civilization in which it emerges. There is no need for it. There are really no rules that are in place. There are general consensuses, but there are no strict rules. Mathematics have rules. Filmmaking does not. I was once told by an instructor of mine when I was attending a class that there are no rules of filmmaking, there are only sins, and the worst sin is boredom. Though I can empathize with such a notion, with such a concept, and definitely, it makes complete sense. But if you're a filmmaker, I believe you should execute your work without consideration for so-called sins or laws set down by those of previous schools of thought. Do not bind the filmmaking process to a set structure whatsoever that could prevent you from realizing true artistic freedom in any way. And as a result, you make films that you want to make that's true to you. This, however, takes me to the concept of making a film for an audience. The common practice within filmmaking, ever since it has become a hallmark as an industry, and especially as a business, as a profitable business, is that film should be made with the audience and profit returned in mind, so that the project can be completed and exhibited with the greatest success. You want to have the greatest critical and commercial success intertwined with each other. But in actuality, if you make your artwork for other people, I believe it ceases to be your artwork. It completely ceases to be that. But then again, there is another side to this coin. When films are completely finished and screened to the audience, then it does become theirs. I'm of the opinion that it does. And if it seems that I'm now in contradiction to my previous statement, let me explain my rationale. Quentin Tarantino once said that he makes films that he would like to watch and hopes that other people would enjoy it as well. I decide I want to take a step further than that, and I say I make the films I would want to watch, and if people happen to watch it and like it, then good. If people happen to watch it and then hate it, then it's just as well. John Waters once said that getting beat up after you show your movie is a reaction. It's not applause, it's the reverse of applause. What's worse if nobody did anything? The fact of the matter is that you created something that is completely your own. But there is another side to the blade that is complete creative control. Because there are the psychological aspects of self-doubt when the film you have spent so much time on is sorely passed over. The fact of the matter is most filmmakers that I've come to understand, when they want to have a film made, they want as many people as possible to see it. I can sympathize with such ideas, to be watched and acclaimed as many of the directors that inspire you. I would love to be as critically acclaimed and also as financially successful as many of the directors that inspired me to get into filmmaking in the first place. But at the same time, art should only be made for the artist, in my opinion. The art must reflect the artist, and the filmmaking reflects more than just the director. This is one of the most collaborative efforts in all of art because it requires so many different disciplines. It requires costumes, it requires art design, set design, lighting, cinematography. It requires all of these different artists of their own different talents to make a product that is truly unique, truly their own. There is an imprint. I believe that there is an imprint of every person working on the film in that film. One way or another, there is a small piece of that person in the movie. There is a staunch difference, however, between creating a film that is entirely your own without regard to rules and structure, and films that are just downright lazy. And lazy films are movies that people make in order to cash in on money, publicity, or whatever else they can, or whatever else they deem that they're trying to cash in on. But in the most honest of perspectives that I can have, lazy films are the hallmark of truly bad artists, truly bad filmmakers. It is quite true that art is in the eye of the beholder, as it's said. Art is so subjective that opinions can fly all over the spectrum of what is good and what is bad, to mediocre, to great, to fantastic, to abysmal, whatever it might happen to be. There are plenty of films, paintings, books, graphic novels, even that people love and consider completely strong, genuine art, like the definition of art that I can probably consider to be complete and total shit. And I pretty much, and actually no, I'm not pretty much, I am absolutely certain that it is true of the reverse as well. Things that I consider to be complete, genuine examples of that art form, other people might see as, complete mediocrity. But on the other hand, lazy artists are truly people who are only involved in art because they have no other place to go or belong. And this is not to say that they are antisocial people or renegades and mavericks, that we cannot classify them as one thing or another, that it kind of goes beyond our reasoning, our rationale. These people are displaced because I find that they have not been able to identify themselves as anything, because their commitment to themselves and to their ambitions regarding whatever drives them, whatever their interests or their passions might happen to be or might happen to have been, they're just as superficial as the work they produce. These people, I believe, have the worst of the wrong reasons to get into art, and they're not artists of the truest sense of the label. What I can most accurately call these people who drift from discipline to occupation, they're pretty much, I consider to be empty shells. I know that can be considerably quite judgmental on my part, but it's like people going into the army because there is no other place to go. They have not found anything that may have given them fulfillment in life or in a career, or they are forced due to lack of options regarding financial or social constraints set upon them, rather than for free choices that they want to go into the army for their own reasons to serve in the military. You have to realize that I believe that you have to realize that if you're not fully committed to body and mind to your life's career, willing to sacrifice everything in pursuit of an absolute freedom of expression, then you truly are not living for yourself, and you're an empty shell of what you could be. You're a shell, you're empty, you can be filled with something that really could make you have a central purpose that you find. I don't believe that other people are going to give you purpose. I don't believe you can find purpose in necessarily groups or whatever. It's something that you have to discover on your own. It's not something that's going to be given to you. Anarchy as art is a full realization of these principles. And a life lived as ordained by only the rational and emotional connectivity one has with themselves and the world, not something that is taught as something that they must do, or a code they must adhere to in order to be considered part of the group. Due to how lost one can easily find themselves when no structure is supplied to them, when anarchy in filmmaking, especially in a field as volatile as filmmaking, is presented to them, it is a very scary thought, and it is the true test, I believe, of an overpoweringly inspired artist to exist in an anarchic state of being. When profundity and complexity of the work matches that of the artists themselves and can truly be declared not only to be the best of the work that the artist can produce, but also an accurate reflection of the mind and the emotion of that artist, then you not only have achieved a state of being within the artistic world as accurately can be described as self-sufficiency, but also one of absolute tranquility. Now, I'm not saying tranquility, that's when you reach a state of dynamic equilibrium and you stay there. It's through a lot of struggle and hard work to remain in a state of tranquility with your art. But also, in an absolute state of tranquility in a world that deems the philosophy of anarchy, especially in a world that is comprised of nothing but rules, it's something to be avoided and even scorned.